Hello and welcome to the Security and Risk Professional Insight series. This is episode 1. We've been running this series, was the original Security Consultant Insight series. We've expanded that and we have a number of episodes that I want to walk you through. But the protocols for this particular session, it is being recorded. It'll go for no more than 60 minutes. We'll close it off at the top of the hour if we're still going. And ideally use the Q&A. You're welcome to put in some comments for the chat and let us know where you're listening from. But use the Q&A, and that way those questions are recorded. We can always come back to you as well. In terms of the content and where you'll be able to access the recorded versions, go to spaceandearthnetwork.com. This is a member-only area, and we've got a code there, SRPIS. You'll be able to get free membership to that platform. There's some forums and groups in there as well, but all the recorded sessions will be in the Space and Earth Network, and we'll share that through our communications with you. Thank you to our national partners, Fugro Spark and LC60. Fugro Spark is a remote operations centre in Perth, and LC60 is a satellite and AI company working out of Malaysia and in Perth as well, so worth checking out. And also very much thank you to our series and session sponsors, Davcor Group with EVA, EKA Cyberlock, Camlock Systems and SmartLock Digital. And this session in particular is being sponsored and supported by Davcor, and also to Boone Eden security experts there as well, so check out that content. This series is being run alongside our State of Cyber series with ISACA. That's also celebrating a number of years with us. So if you've got interest in the cyber side as well, check that out. And I did want to raise, we did a session earlier this week on CMMC, which relates into the SOCI Act and the like for critical infrastructure, and that's a framework by the US Department of War. So it's worth being across that for sure. Also, we'll be up in Singapore in a couple of weeks for Millipol with ST Engineering, doing a lot in AI, advanced homeland security applications. And then we'll be in Malaysia doing an Earth observation advanced technology session with the Malaysian Space Agency and Nepal as well. That slide hasn't quite come through. This session, securing remote infrastructure, lessons from the field, we're going to get underway. I just again wanted to highlight what we've got coming up next week. We're looking at the Australian Protective Security Policy Framework and the SCET product evaluation. We've got a session on national security and the implications of the Middle East and Ukraine conflicts as they continue. And we're also going to be diving into surveillance and public safety, and also local government and developments in urban design as well. And we've got Cody with us in a couple of those sessions as well. So that's enough from me. I'm going to hand over to and introduce the panel. We've got Aaron Lincoln, National Business Development Manager with Davcor in Brisbane. Aaron, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Brendan Laidler, General Manager with Census Gatso Group. Brendan, thanks for joining us from Melbourne. Gary Shaw, General Manager with Ruswin, and was with us last year on a session like this. But Gary, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And Cody Ludby here in Sydney, co-founder and managing director with Core 42. Cody, always a pleasure.
Great to be here. Thanks, Chris.
Nice. Securing remote infrastructure. There's been a lot of news, particularly around sort of even just diesel tanks around the country getting hit as the price of diesel soars. We've got the National Defence Strategy being released today with big spending increases, which also includes for civil preparedness and resilience. So that's naturally across the country. And then there's a SOCI Act review underway as well. So there's a lot happening, and the challenges of securing remote infrastructure never really goes away. Aaron, as the National Business Manager, what are you seeing with Davcor? And then we'll cover off on some of the solutions that you've got as well before we move to the panel.
But primarily, I'm dealing with critical infrastructure day in, day out. There's an uncomfortable feeling of where security's at for remote assets, and solely relying on the mechanical, physical locking for it. And obviously SOCI and the changes or upcoming changes to SOCI is also driving a lot of the interest in security uplift for remote assets.
What are some of the pain points that you're seeing? So the low-level pain points that clients have at the moment?
With remote infrastructure, it's just a lack of control. That's the main one, the lack of control of who has access, when they have access, and also the limited visibility for incident response on knowing who was at a site, when and where.
The auditing aspect's always important. Brendan, I'll come to you. Maybe introduce us to your role and Census GATSO, because I think you're in. We were saying before, just before we commenced, you're not quite the end user. You're in the middle. Maybe introduce us to your role.
Yeah, right. So I'm the General Manager at Maintenance and Support at Census GATSO Australia, part of the Census GATSO group. We specialise in enforcement services, so road enforcement, speed cameras, ANPR, point-to-point type activities. As we know, they can be a target of public attention at times. They are something that we do need to protect against. We work primarily for government departments in managing those assets, looking after operating and managing them. In different scenarios, we're either operating their equipment, or in some scenarios, we work as a managed service provider, owning and operating the equipment. So therefore, we are the end user, just supplying an output to the government departments that we work for. So both of those different types of activities pose, different challenges for us in the way we secure and maintain that equipment and those assets in the field.
I understand you've worked with Davcor before. Maybe just talk us through sort of that type of work and some of the key challenges that you're facing.
Yeah, I think it reflects back to what Aaron mentioned before around having control, much tighter control over who and when people can have access to sites. Previously, we ran master key type models that were shared out, and there was no audit trail or ability to track when people were going to site, who actually physically had those keys. We knew which maybe subcontractors or organisations possessed them, but we didn't know who they were in the physical possession of and being able to use. So with the government, we worked with Davcor to introduce the electronic lock type structure on our assets, and now we provide routine audits and routine feedback to the client to match with their work order processes that allow access to site to show that everybody's complying with the requirements that they have under the contract. So it was a really good project we undertook about 2 years ago, and it's still working quite well.
Nice. And to Gary, maybe introduce us to your role. And I understand you've worked with Davcor before as well, but just your current role.
Yeah, look, thanks, Chris. Look, I'm the General Manager for Russwin. Our footprint, I suppose, is central, west and north Queensland, and then also out in the Pacific Islands, so PNG, Indonesia and things like that. So we certainly have got the coverage and got some wide distances and remote areas to sort of cover. And yes, have worked with Davcor and Aaron in the past in products and securing customers' assets.
I take it that even remote out of country, do you still get access to remote sites? You want to have access even if you're in a different country?
Look, we do. Look, I mean, it's country Pacific, I suppose. I mean, obviously they sort of run independently. For us here in Australia, it's obviously the distances that we cover and the assets that we need to obviously go and service and maintain in security. So that's is part of a bit of a critical thing that we take care of.
Nice. And I know with some infrastructure operators, oil and gas and the like, they want to have consistency, even though they might be operating in different countries. So obviously, when we talk about remote locations and remote infrastructure, it's not just in Australia being remote. It might even be in a different country.
Correct. The outcome's the same. I mean, effectively, it doesn't matter. There's no borders. If you talk about mining, you talk about gas, commercial, government, things like that. I mean, it doesn't really matter what country you're in. The outcome's still the same. It's having that controlled access and traceability.
Nice. And Cody, some of the work that you're doing, interesting for both sides, both security and the urban design, because I think even securing infrastructure in urban design context, being remote, will also come into your remit.
Yeah, that's right. So I run a company called Core 42. We're a security advisory and research firm. So security consultants for critical infrastructure, major rail projects, commercial and urban design, public precincts. I think what's been really interesting on this topic, just prior to, I suppose, what's been happening in the Middle East and the impacts we're starting to see on supply chain is some research that we ran late last year actually surveyed a number of international executive security managers, and number 2 on their list of key areas of focus for 2030 was supply chain risk. So this is something I think the industry has been quite aware of for a while, and remote infrastructure is critical to that supply chain. And to the other panelists' points, I think often is less of a focus because it is sort of out of sight, out of mind for a lot of organisations until something does go wrong.
And I think the current trend at the moment is things can go wrong very quickly. The trends can change and adapt. And I mentioned the ABC did a report on 7:30 just the other night on the scope of diesel, but even the farmers are getting hit in their remote locations as well. And the old days of leaving the gate open are gone. So Aaron, maybe talk us through to some of the solutions that Davcor's got in the EKA Cyberlock in particular as an example, because it's one of those things of not just securing access, but understanding if that access has been breached, and then understanding who's getting access and at what time. So things like the Cyberlock, there's not many on the market like it. So I think that's why we often get a lot of interest into these sessions. But yeah, just some of the solutions that Davcor's got in relation to securing infrastructure.
Look, Davcor has got high security mechanical master key systems, locking hardware. I sort of sit mainly in the electronic cyberlock space, the electronic keying system space, which is, products like Cyberlock and other products, in that market are specifically designed for remote assets. They're designed to be retrofittable into areas with no power, areas with no network connection. Right, so the ability to upgrade from a basic key to a master key system is all well and good as long as that master key system is very, very well managed. You have to have very robust policies, procedures to be able to keep that tight. But even as tight as you'd keep that keying system, you're still not getting the audit events, the traceability after the fact for incident investigation. So a lot of the critical infrastructure providers I'm talking to are quite uncomfortable with that in where the legislation is going for critical infrastructure. So the upgrade path is to an electronic system where, yes, it's not going to stop someone who wants to break in. They're going to break in, but it allows the response to be much quicker and much more effective.
Brendan, maybe talk us through, you implemented this in some of your infrastructure. Maybe just talk us through, because I take it's integrated to a master key system. You are managing that?
Yeah, so we took on board the entire EKA Cyberlock platform, which included the cyber web management system for those locks and those keys. So the locks were retrofittable into our cabinets and into our locks that we had. So it was really quite a simple process, and I mean that, it was quite simple. The biggest sign-off we had was with the end client to make sure that the process we were going to use to audit and supply the information to them was met. But the rollout itself was quite simple. We rolled them out into the locks. It was a 5-minute activity to put them onto each of the locks on each of the sites and each of the handles. And then we went through a training exercise with our staff on how they use those keys, how they're able to gain the access. We have a bit of a unique implementation where we have to directly grant access per access. So we have a high administrative load on how we do that. But all that was really easily achievable with the platform, which was good. And it's been working really well now. So it really didn't impact operations too much to bring this in, but it drastically improved our ability to control access, know when people were there and understand and improve that security. So yeah, it was a really good program.
Yeah, I think with the camera, you've got a sort of an audit trail, a chain of evidence chain there that you've got to go. There's a question here, and I'll throw it open to. We don't have to answer it straight away because you may not have the answer, but what are the security blind spots of remote infrastructure amidst Iran and Ukraine war? What are our options to remediate blind spots? If someone wants to take that, jump in, let me know. But I suppose my next question was going to be around power and having access to power at sites, and how that can change access control options. And once you've got power, you need comms as well. But yeah, just what are we seeing in certain sites for power? I take it the EKA Cyberlock is battery power. What's the power requirements, Aaron?
No power requirements required on site. So that's the beauty of it. We do a lot of enclosures, so traffic signal controllers, ITS cabinets, water pump stations, right? So it's just, as Brendan said, it's a straight retrofit, whether it's a padlock or a locking cylinder, but there's no battery within it. All the power comes from the key. So the key contains all the intelligence, all the access permissions, time and date restrictions. That's all loaded into the key. So the system's designed to be completely offline. So when you look at it from a cyber perspective, some of the feedback I'm starting to get is that it's quite beneficial in that we don't have an online system. So if there is a cyber incident, we lose a server, you lose a network, the system doesn't go down. There's full offline redundancy in it. So you're not going to block access as you would with a hardwired system.
And Gary,
dependent.
Yeah, and the lack of power. But Gary, do you find that most remote sites are looking at getting power, even just through solar power now, solar power panels and the like?
Yeah, look, it's a bit of a mixture of both, Chris. I mean, obviously, you know, our business. I mean, obviously, we're with Russwin. We're the supplier to the end user effectively. So, you know, we're out there supplying and servicing systems on a daily basis. So we are seeing power becoming a bit of an issue. Obviously, some sites it's not cost viable to put in power. Solar systems are there, but obviously there's still restrictions with solar because obviously you've got to make sure your power calculations are right to run the equipment that's out there. So, you know, whilst we have a lot of products under our portfolio, you know, the EKA solution sometimes really fits really well for that remote infrastructure because fully offline, you don't. It keeps the cost to a minimum while implementing security controls.
Nice.
And sorry, Chris, if I can just add.
Yeah, go.
One of the major concerns we've had over the last 4 or 5 years is the theft of copper from the supply to our sites. So we actually get a big problem where the sites are down and we have no power to the site, even if we wanted it to be there. And that's why the solution we actually selected, we went away from the security fault type access and things of that nature, because we could still then readily access our facilities, even though we've had those type of attacks or thefts incur against us. So it was quite a key decision-making criteria when we went through this process to select a supplier, is that we still needed to get access even in the lack of power on the site. So yeah, I just wanted to add that into the conversation.
I think it's important to understand the who you're dealing with as well, right? So as you say, the theft of copper, we just mentioned the theft of diesel. They're very motivated attackers, and being remote, they've got the time. So delay tactics don't necessarily work. And I was about to move to sort of the access of getting power there. You can get comms there. Then you can put a camera there. And again, trying to answer this question around blind spots. But it's great having a camera, but if they're there at night with hoodies and no rego, and you're a day or two away from response, you're kind of wasting that infrastructure. Cody, what are your thoughts around the creating surveillance and getting power and comms to a remote site? I suppose it does come down to that risk assessment as to, you know, who's the likely threat actor.
Yeah, that's right. And I think particularly in these very remote locations, it is a massive challenge as to what is, I guess, proportionate, because in these heightened environments, we're seeing more of this activity, but for a very long period of time, these sites, you know, aren't necessarily being targeted every day or every week. So it applies just as much in life safety to me as it does in more traditional just protecting assets. A coroner is going to ask you, what did you know, when did you know it, and what did you do about it? If you sort of take that mindset to a risk assessment for these critical remote sites, and imagine that you're in the hot seat when the executive's asking you questions as to why budget flowed to the fancy new office fit out security cameras versus trying to get power and data to a remote site that, you know, hinges your entire utility network, for example. I think those are the types of things that security people need to be thinking about when they're having these conversations. I think it's really easy to prioritize stuff that is visible and in front of most of the workforce for these big organizations because you're interacting with it every day. And that out of sight, out of mind concept can really start to bite you in these remote areas when budget could have probably been allocated if we didn't upgrade the access control system this year in head office, for example. So thinking through those consequences and how we might be able to communicate that better within organizations, I think is an important one.
It's a challenge if you're thinking about sort of water infrastructure. Power is the biggest one, transformer, and you come back to the copper theft and the like. I have had instances where people have died on sites. High voltage issues have been electrocuted going in there, and again, there's no surveillance over those sites as well. But you've got to have an understanding of the access. Aaron, maybe the types of remote infrastructure that you're servicing and the sort of what is actually there for you to be for them to be accessing as well. So getting an understanding of the risk environment.
Right, so remote infrastructure doesn't actually have to be 500 kilometres away from your head office building. It could be just across the road. So when we talk about remote infrastructure, I would say most of it is actually sitting in the cities. I think of remote infrastructure. Obviously, you've got your zone substations for your electrical wholesalers, but your water providers, so the water utilities, have got thousands of pump stations and water sampling stations scattered right throughout the suburbs. So there's no real barrier between the public and your infrastructure sitting inside that cabinet. Your enclosure is your only cabinet. You look at telecommunications pits are another one. People are walking over them all day, every day. There's a risk there. We get a lot of copper theft through them, and that's a tough one to solve. Other infrastructure, I mean, we look at, telecommunications towers in the transport industry, as Brendan has, the enforcement camera networks, the traffic signal controllers, the electronic signage for roadways. All of these are targets for either vandalism, copper theft, or malicious actors, essentially. So, yeah, the remoteness side of it is potentially not just out in the middle of the country. It's it's anything really that's outside your building. So having the ability to control the access the same way we do in a head office outside of the building is what these systems are designed for.
The other one would be local government, and who have their operations all over the place, parks, public toilets, and the like. Are you finding that that's another area in terms of local government? And because I know most toilets now, they want to have control over access as well, although there's often power and comms there. But yeah, where are some of the trends that you're seeing on the client base? Is there any particular industry that is benefiting the most or uptaking the cyber locks as an example?
Yeah, well, you look at councils, and where I am in Brisbane, the councils up here are being quite proactive in regard to master key systems. I mean, those master key systems in a council setting, I think I've said it before, that it is the worst place to try and keep control of a mechanical master key system. You have so many sites, such a large geographic area, and so many stakeholders, staff, public, contractors. So we are seeing a shift, definitely, the automatic locking, battery locks on the public toilets, so automatic opening and closing. We're seeing a lot of the council sites starting to move away from the mechanical cylinders as the override for their electronic access control, and using something like CyberLock as a backup if that goes down. So a lot of those council remote sites are on a 4G network, right? So other electronic systems are being used as the backup if that goes down. So councils are definitely, and they are considered critical infrastructure.
Cody, you do a lot of risk assessment kind of work as well. How do you approach sort of that risk assessment asset? Because I think, as Aaron just kind of pointed out, there's such a range of different infrastructure. But yeah, how do you go about the risk assessment of a remote site? What are your considerations?
Yeah, I think particularly for these very distributed assets, whether they're in the city or out in more remote areas, it's trying to find a way to compare apples to apples. So if you take a rail network, for example, like rail signaling is critical for the railway to run, but within that, there is a lot of different types of equipment that have different access opportunities and so on. So trying to find a way to communicate elements of that when you're not an expert in rail signaling. So it's all about that stakeholder engagement piece to understand how all of these bits actually come together and where the critical interdependencies are so that you can actually assess it correctly. I think it's very easy to kind of get into the trap of trying to group things too broadly and give some sort of criticality assessment against that. But getting into a little bit more detail and spending more time talking to people on the ground, you actually realize that, oh, we're only a switch away from this whole thing being turned off. And, you know, even from a malicious act perspective, a few recent examples in Europe with some of the sabotage incidents on the railways leading up to the Olympics in Bologna, Paris a few years before that, really go to show that it doesn't take a lot sometimes for a lot of these systems to fall over. And I think the risk assessment piece is really about trying to communicate that. It's so easy to say, well, we're going to specify a 3 meter high small aperture weld mesh fence. But if you're not talking about, you know, your response in terms of how long that's going to take for someone to get over that fence, you're kind of missing half the picture. So that risk assessment piece is really the opportunity to communicate some of those issues in a way that an executive can understand, a decision maker can understand, and not get too much into the weeds. So it's a dual hat. You've got to get into the weeds to be able to communicate simply where to focus. And I think good consultants can kind of synthesize that. You can't communicate the weeds to the executive, but you also can't simplify it too much. You still need to communicate the complexity.
And you've got to flip it into a business case. And Brendan, it's a good segue to you. The business case, what was sort of the preparation for rolling out? That sounded like a big program. What was the business case or risk assessment? What was the kind of process you went through?
Yeah, it was a collaborative process we went through with a client at the time. They had gone through a security incident, a cyber security incident, that had resulted in them understanding that the controls they had in place and the measures they had in place around understanding who was on site, when, where, and how were not sufficient enough to be able to identify when the actual event had taken place, how it had taken place, who was there, when the ingestion into the network occurred. So as part of that, we did a collaborative effort. There's a couple of different vendors in the space that work with the same end user, and we all work collaboratively to work out the best way to introduce increased security measures. It wasn't just limited to this activity in itself around increasing the locks. There was increased scrutiny on hiring. There was increased scrutiny on cyber equipment, laptops, the like, things that are being used. So there was a whole gamut of actions taken to increase not only the physical security, but also the cyber security of our infrastructure. And as part of that, that's where we worked together to land on the solution from EKA, which was excellent. And we also implemented some other CCTV in instances at sites, which were, as you mentioned before, independently solar powered, that type of activity, so that they were standalone from the grid, from the infrastructure. So that would allow us to also have a secondary data point we could use if required when any information or any activity or incidents may have occurred. So
very good. It is that crossover. Yeah, it is that. It sounds like it, regardless of being in cyber, physical always come together. We always, that's why we do a cyber series as well. And it actually comes back to Satya's comment here in terms of DDoS attacks. But it's also remote sites can provide network access potentially as well. So the physical aspects of a cyber attack need to be taken into consideration. Gary, what you're seeing with clients and some of their justifications and business cases for upgrades, is that sort of along the same lines as Brendan, or what are some of the trends you're seeing from the client side for general uplift?
Yeah, look, we're starting to see a slow shift in customers thinking. It's obviously broadly, it's widely brought out there now that security is critical. We're still seeing a lot of mechanical stuff out there, outdated systems. I think you sort of find that there's a bit of out of sight, out of mind scenario. And we've still got a bit, in some areas, certainly, we've still got the issue of, or not the issue, I would say, we've still got the thinking of trust, I suppose, in a lot of people, so that, it's not going to happen to us. So it does take an incident to occur for people to be proactive, unfortunately. But we are, as I said, the shift is changing. We are seeing the shift to inquiries coming through, people looking at systems, those systems have to be fit for purpose too. So, sometimes metro style systems don't work well out in the country. So you got to understand what's around. But there is a shift.
Yeah, very good. And I was going to come to this comparison. There's a comparison to, say, a roam lock here. I was going to move to sort of the auditing and what the benefits of having something like a cyber lock on site has, because again, it sounds like the business case is often after an incident, and they realise, hang on, we didn't have any visibility there, and how can we create that? It's called the security decay theory, I think, in terms of the response. But yeah. Maybe to Aaron on this question here, in terms of where CyberLock is in the market, what are the options? And we've done sessions with Davcor Group in the past in terms of the master keying systems and the 4KS, your premium products here. Yeah, where are you in the market and the strength in the market?
Look, I think CyberLock's been around for 27 years now. It's probably the most robust and reliable in the market. It's definitely the oldest, that's for sure. So it's been around a long time. And I guess going back to what Gary said, whatever system someone chooses to put in, it's going to be an advantage. It's going to be an uplift. If you've got some way to control the access and you've got some visibility on the audits, and you can easily mitigate lost keys, there are systems out there to do it, whether they're wired, whether they're battery locks, whether they're batteryless locks. So I would just encourage anybody to have a look at all of them. There will be, as Gary said, fit for purpose for whatever site. Obviously, I'm going to be very biased towards CyberLock because I look after it. But look, I think the SOCI is driving a nationwide uplift, and any product that's chosen that impacts that uplift, it can only be good for the country.
Nice. And disclaimer, Davcor's sponsoring. So, Brett, thanks for the question. But yeah, I think be aware of where Davcor Group is in the market as well, and some of their key systems. They are market leading. I was going to I've got two lines of train of thought at the moment. One is on the auditing, but then I might address that with looking at the life safety, because we're talking about security, but it's not necessarily always about security. It's about safety on some of this infrastructure. I was going to come to Cody. The need for an audit trail, it's not necessarily going to be from security all the time. It's sometimes often about safety and making sure that there's some accountability on who's accessing these sites. I mentioned high voltage power before. What are you seeing there from the safety angle, safety and security, the balance?
Yeah, I think more and more people are starting to understand that security in some way should be treated the same as safety when it comes to this idea of traceability and audit trail, not just from an access rights perspective, but more broadly in terms of security decision making. So what we don't want is compliance theatre, which is we just have to do a JH if we're going to open a gate, getting too far out of control in terms of paperwork and the like. But I go back to that earlier point around the three things that you'll be asked if someone were to, unfortunately have a fatality on your site, which is, what did you know, when did you know it, and what did you do about it? You should have something documented around what decisions were made and why they were made. And when it comes to things like, why was that person on site, and did you know they were on site, and what did you do to make sure that they were safe while they were on site? That equally applies to security decision making as well. So whilst we haven't seen security tested a lot in the courts when it comes to that sort of equivalency, what we're seeing out of the UK with Martin's Law, for example, I think very quickly we might start to catch up around probing a little deeper around the decisions that organisations have made about keeping their staff safe and secure from foreseeable harms, whether that's an assault or being caught up in an incident if someone's trespassed, through to that trespasser interfacing with a HV piece of equipment, for example. So more and more I'm seeing the two blend in terms of how that traceability needs to be managed, so that it's very clear what's been done and why.
Nice. Brendan, maybe to you first, is your audit program. How do you approach it, and what do you see your key data, sort of best data that you get from your locking systems for your audits? Yeah, what type of audit program do you have?
Yeah, so we have, as I sort of touched on earlier, we work in a high compliance environment, being it's an enforcement camera industry. So every time somebody goes near a site, is in the vicinity of the site, this type of activity needs to be tracked and recorded. Previously, we had, well, we still do have, but we have paper-based activities where we record people's times and accesses. And whilst sufficient, we all know how accurate they can be and how easily manipulated those types of things can be in terms of the auditing and reporting that comes out of it. So having something that allows us to have a digital record, which is not able to be altered or changed, and it's a factual record of what's been done or when and how, has really helped us to align with that compliance type nature of our industry and with the access that we're allowed to have to those assets, because we have to request access and have approval. We're able to then prove definitively when we were there, why we were there, that type of activity. So it's given not only us the ability to show what we're doing when, it also gives our client in the high compliance driven environment the confidence that we're actually providing factual information from those tools. So it really has improved the transparency in the industry, in our area, in the industry, for our client, and it's been a really positive transition for them in this industry. So,
well, I did have a question of the return on investment, but it sounds like it's a return on business requirements, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah. It really is, and look, being that we work with the government, the investment, even if it wasn't for the government, wasn't too substantial for what it does bring for us. So I definitely believe we've got a return on that investment very quickly. It also helped us to improve with our continuous improvement of operations, because it started to show where we could get some efficiencies out of people by tracking. People don't like to be tracked, but at the same time, by having records of when people were in different places, we could then understand, well, where is our productivity? Where are we losing time? Because if we're in one remote space here and another remote space here, and there's a significant gap in between, we can then start talking and working with our employees to ensure that we're actually getting those efficiencies as well. So it had some unseen benefits that we work towards as well by having that auditing capability.
I think that comes to your point, Cody, in terms of a good consultant doing that initial risk assessment can then start to highlight and transfer it back into business outcomes, trying to see the unseen first before they make that investment is a bit of a skill.
Absolutely, and communicating that in a way that they understand, because I think waiting for things like regulation or waiting for something to happen is the most expensive way to do security, and it always has been. And we keep doing it because I think everybody has this she'll be right attitude, particularly when it comes to spending money on what equates to insurance. It's really kind of similar thinking to how security is treated by many, because if it does its job, nothing happens. So people are like, did we need to spend the money on security? It's kind of that chicken and egg problem. So I like to instead present it more in that risk-led, it's a living set of decisions that need to be made. It's not a one-off investment. It's more to the culture of the organization, and this idea of being more, I suppose, protective of your staff and your operations, and more from a nurturing perspective, I suppose. You're setting up the environment for success so that the business can continue to operate without having to worry about these things if things change. So with current events, it's kind of a great example of that, which is things can change very quickly. Those that have been thinking, maybe not that there will be another war in the Middle East, but have been thinking, okay, I want to at least understand what my dependencies are so that when things do happen, I can make decisions quickly. That type of thinking and culture, I think, is very important for these types of operators.
Aaron, maybe back from the auditing, is also how configurable is the system, and what type of data can you get from it? But yeah, what's the configuration of it? Is it broad or pretty limited?
Very broad, and the software's been around for 27 years, so it's been constantly developed based on customer feedback. So it can be a bit confusing at times for new users because there's 100 different ways to do the same thing in the software. But all the offline redundancy, they are features built into the software. Dynamic tagging. So when we look at the safety side of it, right? If a person in the system, their induction runs out or their license expires, it automatically cuts off access to high-risk sites that is dependent on. So the software has a lot of functionality around managing the lost keys, if keys are lost, and controlling who can go where and when. So on the audit side, there is, I think, about 500 different notifiable audit events, right? And every good system, electronic system, should have that. So it's not just knowing who accessed and when, it was who tried to access and was denied, right? So there's a lot of functionality in the software that allows you to, one, automate it as much as you like, integrate it with your other existing access control system, so it can be run from a separate head end, and it just floats in the background, and obviously for your reporting as well.
It sounds like you've just answered this question that's just come in from Brett again. Is a key is taken or stolen? How easily can the site be secured against a lost key within that system as well, within the EKA CyberLock? I take it you can easily take one offline if it's compromised?
So because we run an offline system, there's two ways we manage lost keys. The first one primarily is we don't allow these keys to just work indefinitely. They have a limited operational life. Right? So we might say, for example, let's say 7 days. So when a key communicates with the server, it starts the clock in the key, and that'll start counting down 48 hours, 7 days, whatever the setting is in that key. It could be 5 minutes if you wanted it to. And communication with the server can happen a couple of different ways: mobile phones, network devices, that sort of thing. So what it means is if a key is lost, you only have the balance of that expiry period remaining before the key stops working completely. Now, the backup to that is any lock can be told by any key to contain the blacklist, which means that if a lost key touches one of those locks, it'll disable the key on contact.
One thing I like about configurable systems is it makes you think about it, and I think it comes back to what Brendan was saying in terms of you actually understand your business or your terms of access a lot better than you would otherwise a simple key that you hope doesn't get lost or is in another master key system. I'm conscious of time as well, but I think the auditing side and the configuration of this is probably the real strength from that, because I think the applications of security and or safety is there. That's a sort of a responsibility as well. But the auditing and the configuration has a lot more return on investment than a normal system would. Maybe I'll open it up to just some closing comments on some of the key challenges, and we say key challenges in the terms of what we're talking about, but yeah, just to the outcomes, I suppose the lessons from the field. I might start with Gary in terms of just your takeaways and what you're currently sort of seeing within remote infrastructure, and any message or lesson for the audience.
Well, look, I think it's Look, further to what probably Cody said, the should be right scenario with some of the remote infrastructure. People see security, I suppose, as a bit of a grudge purchase. And I like the terminology of insurance, but it is a grudge purchase. So, and it's only probably, again, I would sort of say lack of education, because a lot of people just see security sometimes as a master key. And they think as long as I've got a key that can't be copied, effectively they've got all the security they need. So when you're bringing something to the table, other than that, and talking to clients or trying to sort of promote systems to them, it's got to have a bit of that wow factor, the what they can get from it, the audit trail, the restricted access, the time zones. That's all the stuff they're sort of looking for. And as I said earlier, it's got to be fit for purpose. So whilst there's a number of clients that battery operated systems could be good for, that may not be suitable for certain remote areas where it has to be like an offline system, like the EKA system. So you've got to there's a lot of variables that come into it, and again, it's about communication and education with the clients to get the right system for them. There's nothing worse than putting the wrong system in, or a decision that's been, I would sort of say, a decision that's been made in Sydney, which we sort of metro and it gets rolled out throughout Queensland, and all of a sudden you got breakdowns, they haven't worked out the harsh environments, the dust, the rain, all these things come into play. So, it's not like driving half an hour down the road. In some remote areas, a trip down the road is an 8-hour drive and 600 kilometres.
I think there was a key sort of term you used in terms of communication. Garrett Thomas, Garrett, any advice or lessons learned on trying to get staff to use own devices like a mobile phone for these applications? So the staff training, maybe Brendan might be a good one for this one. You obviously did training and education to your end users. Yeah, what's takeaways or lessons learned out of that?
Yeah, it's a great question. We, in our space, we actually have subcontractors that work for the government that also require access to the site. So whilst we manage and maintain the infrastructure, the keys and the access to the site, we had to bring those subcontractors along for the ride to be able to train them up, show them how to use the solution. What worked really well was the fact that, and with this platform, with the CyberLock platform, is that there's multiple ways that you can manage the keys and manage how that they are actually deployed and used by those subcontractors. Be it that they can have an individual key assigned to the person, or alternatively, they can have a unique identifier that then they can use a shared key that goes around between the groups. Key to it though, key to getting them on board was creating clear SOPs for them and how it would work in our environment, and then bringing them on board to show them how simple it is to actually do and use. Our solution resulted in, as Aaron alluded to, we only have a 24-hour expiry on our keys. That's the most, that's all you get. So if a key's lost, it's done with after 24 hours. And that was important to show them, because they would then need to be able to refresh those keys constantly whenever they're using them, if it's daily activity. So that training was really important to give them the portable nature of being able to program them. You had to be able to do it in the field. You had to be able to be doing it out on the side of the road, out next to the infrastructure. And so, yeah, the training side of it was really creating a simple, straightforward process that allowed everybody to use it easily. Another one that's unique, I think, well, I say it's unique because I'm not working with anybody else, is we actually have multiple instances of the electronic locks for the different vendors in the program. So those same operators that are the subcontractors work for each of the vendors under a different different server or solution of the EKA. So that was an added complexity that we had to work with in the training structure to make sure they understood they were connecting to the right instance to be able to program their locks. So whilst it sounds slightly complicated, it really isn't. And the key to everything is information, capture it well, and then provide that and make it available for your resources to use and be able to access as they're doing the work.
I think, well, one, it's a very good question, and two, well answered, Brendan. How much time did you spend on the training? How much investment did you put into that? Or it wasn't over training, but yeah, regular training, or yeah, what did that involve?
No, as I've mentioned before, we work in a high compliance industry, so we focus heavily on documentation. So our processes tend to lean heavily on creating the right documents that are tailored towards the individuals that are going to be using the application or the equipment. And then the training itself, being that it's quite a simple process, was quite light with those people. I think we had one hour or 1.5 hour session where we demonstrated how to do it. We went through a Q&A. We showed them all the processes of how to do it. And then subsequent since then, and this was about 2 years ago, we haven't had any further training because the documentation provided has been able to suffice for new hires in those different roles in those different companies, because they've obviously got existing personnel familiar with the platform, keeping in mind those subcontractors don't use the platform, they just have the key, that's all they have. Within our team, we do refresher training with our team about 6 monthly. We run through and make sure that we're using the platform as well as we should be, and if there's any continuous improvement we want to implement within that platform and the operations.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. One, setting the culture. Sounds you've got a compliance-driven culture, which is good. But I think the training aspect sets that expectations and the standard. And you should kind of maybe or find a way to implement sort of the training within your normal training program for staff or any staff development. Have it there. I think maybe Cody, thoughts on this latest question, but also your general takeaway. Or any lessons learned for remote infrastructure?
Yeah, just on the training element, I mean, I think that's part of just being proactive around security generally and building that culture, as I spoke about a little bit earlier. I think generally with the SOCI Act and the like coming in, I suppose my takeaways from the field, from clients over the last year or so, is that the regulator's catching up to the best operators and those that already really understand their risks and know how to manage their remote sites. So if you're finding that you're starting to get caught out in a compliance sort of catch up, perhaps there's an opportunity to refocus your efforts on trying to be a bit more proactive in some of these areas. The research that I mentioned that we conducted late last year found that about 50% of security executives felt that resilience and rapid recovery capability were an area of extreme focus and something that was missing in training and staff capability in those teams. So I'd say that might be one area that people could focus on, particularly as we've been saying, these remote areas can actually have quite significant flow-on effects. Because we're looking at very distributed and connected infrastructure these days.
Nice. And Aaron, maybe closing off with you is your lessons learned. You're probably getting most of the lessons learned because you're dealing with clients front facing. But yeah, what are you generally seeing clients sort of learning through the process?
Look, I think the critical infrastructure clients that I'm talking to, they got a lot on their plate. And physical locking, which is where I live, it's on their list. It may not be the top of their list, but it's on everybody's list. So I think the security managers and the risk managers, and they're all doing as much as they can at the moment because it's changing very fast. I think the overall attitude towards trying to uplift everything at once is there, but there's only certain resources.
I think you're right. And the other aspect is there's still a lot of legacy systems and equipment across the country that are slowly getting upgraded. So it is surprising, even a lot of my work, I still get surprised of how old some of this equipment is. It's surprising that it's still working. And that's often a trigger for upgrades as well, when it literally stops working and they work out that they need to do something. Look, on that note, we're coming to the top of our, any final questions from the audience, please fire them in now. But I think that's a wonderful session. And this session is obviously recorded, so will be available. So thank you so much to Aaron Lincoln, National Business Development Manager with Davcor, Brendan Laidler, General Manager, Census Gatso Group. And Brendan, thank you very much for your contribution there. Likewise with Gary Shaw, General Manager with Runswin. Quite great to have you back, Gary. And always a pleasure with Cody. Cody Ludby, CPP co-founder and managing director of Core 42. As I said earlier, this session will be available, so you can join. We're calling it IPSEN, the Indo-Pacific Space and Earth. We cover everything from space through to cyber and everything in between, and you've got a free membership there with that code and access the recorded sessions throughout the series. Thank you to our national partners, Fugro Spark and LC60, and obviously to this session in particular. We've got one more question coming in. When's the new legislation, the SOCI Act? I'll put that in the show notes because there's just been a review by Jill Slay out of Adelaide, review of the SOCI Act. So Brett, I'll send you the details on that, and it's well worth the read. But it's I think either later this year or into next year. It'll be an ongoing thing in terms of the SOCI Act. So if you're not across it, you should be. Thank you so much to the Davcor group, the Ever Access to Security, EKA Cyberlock, the CamLock systems are worth having a look at, and the SmartLock Digital, and also to Boone Edom, our other sponsor on these series as well. On that note, I will close off. Thank you so much to the audience and for those who threw out some questions. And there you go. Thanks, Sasha. Great session. So thank you to the panel, and I'll end the session. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.
Okay.